Good morning. This is Paul Routhier.
Good morning. This is Tracy Currington. Good morning, Paul.
How are you?
I am well today. Are you ready to get underway?
I am ready to get underway. Did you just say that to me?
Yeah.
Me being the ex-Navy guy, I'm always ready to get underway.
Hey, I want to start out this episode like a medical infomercial.
Uh-oh.
So here goes. I've been practicing this morning. Are you experiencing burnout? So we're going to talk about, like, today on the podcast, we're going to talk about why you can't scale and having to overcome and uncover some of those growth obstacles. So are you experiencing burnout? Maybe you're overworked. Possibly you're lonely. You're sitting in the chair in the ivory tower all by yourself. The pressures and the stress are getting to you. You're exhausted. You feel like you almost know that you're micromanaging others. You're overloaded in your work schedule. Maybe it's you have delegation reluctance, or you are resistant to change. You're reactionary instead of proactive, or maybe you're just lacking a documented process. Those are all the reasons why we have this podcast episode today, because we want to address this one. This is a big subject.
It is a big subject. What you're defining is what we call founder's dilemma.
Yes.
And it's not an ivory tower. It is stuck in the dungeons of the entrapment of my own mind.
Okay, so no ivory tower. Wrong picture. Well, maybe it's the tower where the tower where it's, instead of a dungeon, it's a prison in a tower.
There you go.
Nonetheless, you're imprisoned in it, and there is so many leaders that are stuck in what this is, what we've talked about before, working in the business instead of on the business, and struggling to scale.
Absolutely.
What would you think is the out of 10 bosses that you'll consult with or you'll coach with, how many of them are stuck in what you've called founder's dilemma?
I would say 99.1% in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
Absolutely. It always requires a mindset shift. And I mean, it makes sense, right? Because we always talk about, when you're an entrepreneur, when you start out as a solopreneur, you're trying to make like the next step to an entrepreneur. There's a difference. The solopreneur wears every hat in the business, and the first rule of scaling is to replicate yourself. So how do you do that? And I always say that, okay, now you have to open up the closet and start handing the hats out. And and there's danger there. That's a real pushback just in itself, because nobody, if I'm an entrepreneur, I own a business. I've started that business from scratch. Yeah. All right. It's my baby, and I'm a little nervous about daycare. Okay. And no one's going to do it as well as I do. So it becomes this struggle between letting other people in and to execute on my plans, as opposed to me just doing it myself.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if I just do it myself, it slows me down to zero. And even with a small staff, it's the same thing. I'm still in charge of everything. I'm just doing it, and start letting those leadership things go to other heads of state, maybe, a sales manager and an HR manager and an accounting manager, and start to do delegation.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What's your percentage rate, and why?
I think it's like you said, I think it's at least 90% of those, and it's probably more like the 99%. The more that I think about it, and there's a lot of leaders that are in the solopreneur, they kind of got it figured out, right? They're like, I've been doing the sales myself, I've been doing the marketing myself, I've been doing all these points myself, and I got a system down, right? And now, they're not even thinking about okay, good. I got it all figured out. I know how long it's going to take me. And now they're stuck in what's called routine. and they're doing the routine task, but the routine tasks are not allowing them to scale. And that's why when you and I were considering this one, I loved when you brought up, like, let's just keep it simple. Why can't I scale my business? Yeah, because I'm the problem. I got myself in a routine, and that sounds all nice until the routine becomes a rut. And then I'm stuck in that rut. There was I read a story where in the New England colonies, when they were making their dirt roads from one town to the other, the heavy rains would come around fall, and the wagons would create these ruts, these deep ruts, 9-12 inch ruts going from one town to the other. And they posted a sign in between one town to the other that read, "Be careful which rut you choose. You'll be in it for the next 9 miles." And I always envision that, like, businesses, they get into this rut and they stay in that rut. And what we want to do is we want to help people come out of that rut by first just diagnosing, why are we there? What, like we gave some of the symptoms, if you're feeling some of those. And I think that's why it would cover 99.9% of business owners, because there's so many that it's just a mom and pop shop and they're not scaling because they're not growing. They're not moving from the solopreneur to the entrepreneur, like you've mentioned. So why are people stuck in this trap?
Well, so it's human nature in one sense, because the mind can only see what it's focused on, what it's looking for, right? So on a daily basis, when you're working in the business, you only see what's going on from a tactical perspective in the business. And sometimes it takes someone else to come in and kind of lift you above the business, so you kind of see where it's going, right? The old days before the GPS came out, we had these things called maps, right?
Yes.
We would go, I'm going from here to Detroit. I need to see how to get there. And we'd fold out this map, and we'd literally be looking from a scale perspective, 30,000 feet above the ground. And we're going to see how we get from point A to point B. And one of the things that we don't do when we're working in the business is we don't bring ourselves up and out so we can see where it's going and what the path should be, right? What the path should be. So, it's kind of apropos that we're talking about this on the border of 2024, because this is the time to pull out the map and see where your business is going to get to by the end of 2024. Am I going to go to Detroit? What roadblocks am I going to run into? What construction areas do I need to avoid? Car accidents, all those things that could possibly happen on my trip to my next revenue goal.
Yeah.
So kind of interesting. So, it's a major mind shift. It really is, to get from in the business to on the business.
Yeah, and you can't see. They say that you can't read the label from the inside of the bottle. So I mean, like, you're going to have to get outside of your business. Like, I loved your illustration of the map, because that's big picture thinking. Like, when you get up out of the business, now I can see the forest through all the trees.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you look at that trip, right? And you're going to need gas at some point, so you kind of plan where you're going to pull off the highway for gas.
Yeah, the mile markers are already outlined.
Mile markers are outlined, all of that good kind of stuff. And one of the big things is that's kind of building the foundation for scaling, right? Because now we're planning it out. We've got a revenue marker that we want to hit by the end of 2024. And we're going to work that back, right? To what do we got to do to get there? So, for example, if I own a small business selling widgets, I got 2 sales guys. My number was $1 million this year, and I want it to be 2 million next year. And so I put that number out there, and then I go, okay, I'm drawing up the map. And I'm going, okay, my sales guys right now are probably 60% capacity. I might be able to build some efficiencies in there, better sales training, do this, better that. But I know to hit that 2 million mark based on, my $1,000 average sale, I'm going to need 2 more sales guys to hit that 2 million. Okay. So what am I going to do? Well, let's work that back. I know I need to fix my sales training and get my guys more efficient. So Q1, I'm going to, one of my pillars for this thing is to train the sales guys up, get them on some kind of training and get their closing ratio up. I want their closing ratio up, say 50 to 70%, right? So that's my first step. And I'm going to start ramping those numbers up based on that sales training halfway through Q1.
Yeah.
Q2, all right, they're at 85% capacity. This is me planning. I'm going, okay, they'll be at, based on the training I put in place, they'll be at 85% capacity. So now I got to bring 2 more sales guys on. So middle of Q1, I need to, hit the job market with, I want resumes in. I want to start interviewing. I want to do all that because I want 2 new sales guys on board and first thing Q2 or 3/4 way Q1, so I can get them through training, because I know based on my business model, it's going to take 30 to 60 days to get them up in production. Maybe my target is 40% with them. Second quarter and third quarter, I want them at 75%, right? You see where this is going. I'm stacking the numbers. I'm bringing the things in. And then that translates to back into what I do for delivery. What's my deliverable? How does my deliverable get produced? If I go to $2 million, what do I need to put in place so that I can get the deliverables out based on that level of sales? Do I need to make adjustments? Do I need to create efficiencies? Can I create efficiencies? Or once again, do I need to add people in or technology in to get that number? So now I'm ramping the business. It's well planned. And I know what my number is. January 1, 2024, I kick the plan in gear, right? And then all these things happen, and I have contingencies planned if something goes wrong, if I run into an unanticipated construction zone and I need to do some other things, or I need to pivot, which we talked about last time, based on the plan. So it at the end of every year, now being 2023, to sit down and with my lead, if I've got leadership, or even if I'm by myself, to sit down and really map out that and get myself the foundation for the growth. So I know where I'm going. I'm not thinking about it. I'm like, what am I going to do next? And I don't forget about it because I'm in the business. I mean, that's up on my wall. That map is like right in front of me. I sit down, I look at it every day when I'm sitting at my desk and move on.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think? What do you,
I love, thank you for taking us through that for the quarters. And it comes back to, like, you and I both in the coaching space and mentoring, that working hard that's not just a great strategy. Just work harder, Paul. I mean, if you just work harder in 2024, but if you don't have clear direction, you can take mass action in the wrong direction and still come up with negative results. I mean, like, I took mass action. Like, mass action seems to be like the kind of the buzz thinking, like just mass action. Okay, I need to have a clear plan. That'll give me direction. So if I have clarity, I'll have direction. If I have direction, now I know what levers to pull, what buttons to push to take mass action. I mean, like, you get to that winning, machine in the casino. I mean, like, oh man, now I know this one's paying off. I'm going to keep on hitting that button and keep hitting that button and riding this wave until I mean, like, the button, because you've got the clarity at the front end, like you're talking about. Now I know what direction I want to take in Q1, leading me into Q2, and now I know the actions to take. When you were talking, I was wondering, how do you find, as far as leaders, when they're resistant to, like, training? Oh, I'm going to train 2 guys. I could have done it faster myself. And I see that's a resistance, right, to the training. And like you said, it's a mindset shift that by investing them for 30 days and getting them up and running and independently going, and like we've talked about, embracing that mindset shift to where this is worth your time, rather than, I mean, because now you got 2 guys on there, they're doing twice or 3 times more than what you could do by yourself. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and there is that, but the numbers show differently, and entrepreneurs or solopreneurs get the numbers right. The number is very simple. To our opening statement, no one could ever do it like you do it, right? As the owner of the business,
Right.
no one can give 100% like I give 100%. But if I got two people doing 80%, what does that give me? That gets me 160%.
No doubt. And I could never do that.
And you can never, ever do 160% on your own.
Yep.
It's just that simple. So I heard a great comment. It was actually by Grant Cardone. I was down in Miami last week, and the comment was that sense of perfection. And he said, perfection is just another word for laziness. It is an excuse not to do things.
Yeah.
And I think the strive for perfection in business does not work. It's the strive for the best that you can do while still giving massive action moving forward.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
that's part of it. And great customer service and all that comes in a different realm. This is more about building, delivering product and service and getting it out so it can be consumed and used and leveraged to grow your business. And that's really kind of what that's about. And to your point, so we've built this plan, right? We've worked it back and we've got buy-in. The entrepreneur buys into what he wants to do. And this is the same for an entrepreneur versus solopreneur. Is you have to delegate, right? So you got to delegate and build the teams either internally or externally. So if I'm Mr. Solopreneur and I'm just getting things started, then I need to start thinking about the things that I'm really good at and want to do, the things that I really don't want to do. And those are the things, by the way, that slow up the business because I don't want to do them, and the things I'm not trained to do. Right. And identifying the resources to get those things done. We might want to use an Upwork or something to subcontract out some of those services so that we can build the team. And you always hear wow, that's expensive. I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to do that. And again, that focuses on the tactical and not on the goal, because the question always becomes, well, are you willing to spend $3,000 to get this built so you can make $4 million at the end of the year?
Right.
That's the question, right? That's the question that brings you up and out of that constrictive, I just made some money, I want to keep it, to this is a tool and I want to build it. Kind of goes back to a healthy relationship with money. But really need to delegate and build the team internally. Now, I know that you do a 360 turnaround. You work with restaurants mostly. I'm sure this is part of that conversation.
Oh, huge.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one, like, a great question is always, what has not delegating cost you already? And you bring up the point. Would you? And that's a great follow-up question. I'm going to borrow that 3,000. Would you rather invest 3,000 now for 4 million later? Because I mean, like, you can keep the 3,000 and that's all you got at the end, because you're refusing to delegate. Like you said, you got two guys doing 80% and now you've boosted up to 160. What I found is basically when I worked through that with the business owner, and they're not even aware. So that's the first thing, is like one of the reasons why they're not delegating and they're stuck in the business and not on the business is lack of awareness. They just didn't realize there was any other way. They were in that rut for the next 9 miles. They're like, well, I've been like this for mile 1, mile 2, mile 3. I've been in this business for 9 years, and they're now that routine has become a rut. They're stuck in solopreneur. They're not even thinking like an entrepreneur. So I think one has been lack of awareness. I think another one has been, I think you mentioned this a little bit, ego. I can do it best. I can do it better than anyone ever could. So I'm not going to train and I'm not going to delegate this because I'm the best at it. And that leads me to number 3. Usually it's a lack of trust. When you really get down to, like, if you go to the why, well, why are you the best at it? So no one's better than you. And when you get down in it, like, it's like, well, there might be other people, but like this one guy I hired one time, and now you're like, oh, okay, so there's something else. There's something else in it, and it's a lack of trust. You don't trust people to do it as good as you could. Yeah, I mean, because I had this one guy, and so he got burned one time. So now, no, we don't hire anybody else. And I think it comes down to one more thing: insecurity. Mm-hmm. And so we've walked through this whole thing where I wasn't aware there was another way. Maybe it was ego. If it's ego, it might lead to a lack of trust in others, and then it leads to insecurity. That need to, like I want to be the one. I want to be the conquering hero instead of working as a team. I want it to be about me. And those are the things that I think keep people from, building that team, hiring more people, and certainly delegating with the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. If somebody can do it at least 80% as good as you can, they need to do it. And the cool thing, what I found, is that extra 20% that, like, well, they can't do it 100%. Like, I want it done 100%. That extra 20% gives them wiggle room for creativity, innovation, to do it better than you could.
Yeah, I think that's right. I'm going to take a little of opposing opinion here because you mentioned something in there, and the entrepreneur thinks it's all about them. And I would strengthen that and say, yeah, it is. And if I can get an entrepreneur to actually take responsibility for that bad relationship, it changes their perspective. And here's what I mean. The only way that you can change the way things are going is if you take responsibility for everything that happens. Mm-hmm. It gives you power to make better decisions. So that bad situation with that employee was the entrepreneur's fault. It was absolutely either he didn't make sure that the person he hired aligned with his, vision, mission, values. He didn't do the proper follow-up to make sure they aligned with the organization. And he probably didn't do the proper training to ensure and have the processes documented to ensure a successful interaction with that employee. Yeah, so at the end of the day, I would take that and I would go, hey, let's forget about it being the employee's fault. What didn't you do to ensure that that employee was doing a great job? And what did you learn from that so we can apply it in the future and, like the match, ignite the rocket and blow the business up, right? And that's really where it goes. So this goes right into team delegation, right? If you don't have your processes in place that you're going to, even if you're using an Upwork, let's say you want to get a landing page of all things built by a contractor on Upwork. If you do not have that documented out clearly and concisely so that he can get that done, what you're creating is a situation where your subcontractor's unclear. You're unclear, so you're going to be unhappy with the website, and the project's going to take a ton of time going back and forth. But if you take the time to clearly identify the outcomes for that page, you clearly define the steps that you want, you clearly define the aesthetics of it, and then you hand that specifications document to the Upwork person, then you've now shortened the time it takes to execute on that landing page. So it's really, when you're talking about building teams and delegating, you have to be clear on what you're delegating, what the intended outcome is, the KPI, how you're going to measure the performance of whatever activity that is, so that you can be clear at the end whether it's been accomplished or not accomplished.
Yeah. I love the piece centered around ownership, because in the conversations that I've had, that was one thing that, like, it was their fault. Like, it was their fault. That's why I'll never hire again, because they did this to me. They did this to me. And how convenient is that? And maybe they did, but like, you hired them. coming back to the ownership spectrum of it, like you hired them, and if you weren't, okay, you were frustrated. Well, frustrated is because they didn't meet your expectations. Well, maybe your expectations were either unrealistic or they were unclear. I mean, like you were talking about we want to build the landing page. And I know in my past, I got caught up in what I want the landing page to look like instead of what do I want the landing page to produce? What do I want the outcome? What is the result I want from this? And get caught up in the aesthetics and like, well, I saw this one, it was really cool, but like, what do I want from mine? That's really good. Thank you for adding in that piece about ownership. That was super good. So how do we dislodge ourselves? How do we break free from the rut? How do we get out of this the ugly side of working in the business? I mean, when you finally know, okay, I'm going to take ownership for it. Anything that happens to me is because of me. So I want to do something about it.
Well, number one, I think the big thing is repetition and vision, right? Mm-hmm. You can see a lot more from the top of the mountain, and it feels a lot better being up there.
Yes, it does.
It does. So when you're on top of the mountain and you can see the whole landscape, then you can start figuring out, because this really comes down to, how are you going to line up those first employees? What are they going to do? I just went through this exercise actually with a client in the UK. And we actually set up 4 pillars for a new hire. So we strategized what main 4 outcomes that particular employee was going to have. And then we figured out what tasks they have to do to get to those 4 pillars. And then we figured out what the KPIs, or the key performance indicators, are going to be to measure performance. And then based on those pillars, those task lists, we built the process out to get each 4 pillar accomplished. And then based on that, she put together the program for the onboarding for that person. So it was very, she's now very clear and concise about the outcomes and the 4 areas that this new hire is going to hit, and, one of them was liaise with the suppliers and the contractors, right, in a service support role. The other one is to be a customer service liaison with the clients, right, and maintain these 2 documents. And here's how that's going to be done, and here's the process to do that. So very clear layout. She's going to have a very successful experience with this employee. And she was saying the exact same thing you were saying. The last time I hired somebody, they screwed up, but we got to a point where she took responsibility for it, and we changed the way she did things. And already the employee doesn't start till January 1st or 2nd. And already she feels so comfortable with bringing this employee on board and getting them trained, because she has a plan of action and documented processes to train this employee into.
Well, it's so good. I was just kind of pulling together what we talked about in the first part of this podcast about embracing that different mindset from solopreneur to entrepreneur, and then taking responsibility or ownership for the system or the processes that are within your system. Very few leaders that when I come in like, okay, you're going to hire for this. Okay, so what exactly are you looking for? What would their responsibilities be? Do you have a job description written up? And they don't. So how would you know if you found it if you don't know what you're looking for?
Exactly.
And then you wouldn't know what to train. I mean, because like they come in and they're like, okay, thanks for giving me this job. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
And then and there's no training plan because there was no job description. And so it's just interesting.
Yeah. How many times have you run a restaurant or come into a restaurant with a new cook being hired, and it's the shadow training
yes.
idea, right? We're going to shadow train you. We don't have any documented processes in the kitchen for cleanup, for any of this stuff, but you watch him You watch him and just do exactly what he does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How long does that training last? About a year?
Yeah.
And it's still not done.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, and you can expedite and to your point, you can expedite that process if you have a clear training plan because you knew what to expect. So he's a line cook. He's the sous chef. Like wherever he's stationed, there needs to be a training plan for that station, from how to open the station, how to close the station, how to work the station, the possible change ups that you give in a pinch that you have to work through and so forth. And there's I remember my first leadership at 19 years old. There was no written documented process. Mm-hmm. Because it's all up here, right? I mean, I think that's where we get, as a business leader, you can get stuck in it because, like, almost intuitively, I need to have this written down. I shoulda. And that's how we live our life. I should have wrote that down. You never wrote that down, and that's stuck up here. You know how to do, but if you go, the business goes with you because it's all stuck up here.
So where I learned this was the U.S. Navy, and I absolutely love that this is coming back right now. So when I was in the Navy, one of the things that you have to do is 6 months in the mess hall. Mm. And when you're in the military, everything is documented. So at each station was the service manual for the station that you were doing, pasted right to the frigging wall, right? Mm. So, I mean, you would train, you would read the manual before you started your mess hall service. You would find out what station that you're going to run, and then that manual would be pasted right up over the station so that you could turn the pages. And if you had a question about what you were doing or the process or what you needed to do, you would open the manual to that particular page and you'd read it. Instead of going to ask the chief, don't go ask the chief. Number one, know your crap and do your stuff. Don't go ask the chief, because that's going to be a painful thing. But those processes were right there. We were trained before going into the kitchen. Those processes were tapped to, if you were like the prep cook, you knew that you had to do, 400 potatoes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But
wash them.
There was a measurable. It's 400 potatoes. Right. So okay, I'm on 100. At least I now know how many I got to go. And if you can teach somebody, how do you peel a spud? What are you carving a monument? No, get it going. Spin it in your hand. Let's go. That kind of stuff. If that's the way you had to, in the older days, that's how you do it. Before the big water machines came out to sand out the edges, and you're just carving out the rough spots. So what about Paul? Any other ways that those that are most, like we talked about, 9 out of 10, 99.99% of people are struggling to work on their business in order to scale it. And they've got to overcome and uncover what are the obstacles are for their growth. What more could we add value to that business owner on this show, how they can grow this trap?
Well, I go back to that map. Number one is to map it out. What does next year look like? What are you trying to accomplish in the business? If you've been in the business a year or 20 years, getting a strategic plan, figuring out what your measurables are going to be in that plan. If you're not measuring what you're doing next year, if you haven't been measuring what you were doing last year, how do you know where you are in the things that are important to you and important in the business? So I need to look at my history to come up with the numbers to know how I'm going to get to the next level that I've put up on the board for next year, because those numbers are important. I need to multiply those numbers in some way, either with technology or people or that, and grow those numbers to make this number off in the future. Once you get all of that high overview, then you start looking at that, and you bring yourself out of the business and you look at that. What could go wrong? Okay. What possible things go wrong? We call them risks, right? What are the risks in the game? And then there's the financial portion too, because they're to take the business from $1 million to $4 million, we are going to have an increase in costs, right? The cost to deliver the product or service,
Yep.
The cost to go out and find all these new prospects that are going to build the building, the cost to market to our existing customer base. So we're going to want to understand what percentage of that revenue that we want to go to, right, is marketing costs. Okay. Because I need to plan out those expenditures along the way. And how am I going to get the money to do that? Am I going to do that bootstrap style and do it through existing revenue? Am I going to go out and get a loan to give my business a little booster charge so I can get to that level and pay the loan back? Am I going to factor receivables to do that? There's many ways to generate cash to make the expenditure to grow the business.
Yeah.
So we want to take that plan, and we've planned out the tasks and all that stuff. We also want to plan out the financials so that we know what we need to spend and when we need to spend it, so we can create a proper cash flow to support those activities.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're watching this right now and you're like, man, that's me. I'm stuck in this thing. Listen, Paul said it right. 99.9% of all business owners are stuck right there too. So you're in good company. I mean, and that's why Paul and myself are putting out a program like this, because we do want to help. And that I know that if I didn't have a voice like Paul speaking into my life, there would be areas in my life where I would be stuck, and I'd stay stuck because either it's a blind spot and I'm totally not aware of it, that like there's an opportunity here and I'm not seeing it. So like a lot of times when I come into, a call with a coach or a mentor, it's like, hey, this is what's going on. What am I not seeing? And like having that space of ownership, of humility that you're willing to say, and then like the I don't know, the beingness that you could change, that things could be better, that things could grow. That's why you need a coach. That's why you need a mentor. That's why, I have those in my life, because I can't see these things. And when you're in it, it's hard for you to see around, like what you were talking about, like these things. Oh, I can grow this way. And like, wait, I'm at $1 million, 4 million's possible. Yeah, it would be if you do this, because I'm on the inside of the bottle and I can't read the label. And then a third party comes along, a coach or a mentor comes along, and I hire them to help me think bigger, think deeper, because they're not in it. They're on the outside look, and they can see a little bit. They've got a better perspective.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I'd love to close this out because we're out of time here, but here's the big thing. When we first opened this up, this was really about control, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's most entrepreneurs or solopreneurs don't want to lose control, so they don't delegate business. What they don't realize is that you're actually gaining more control over the things that are important. My revenue stream. Getting control over the revenue as opposed to controlling the tasks brings you into a strategic positioning when you're looking at your company, and transcends you out of the business and over the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Beautiful. I think one of our mutual friends, Mick, said, you got to leave to go anywhere, and you got to let go to grab hold of something new. And letting go of the solopreneur, had a good 9-year run, but now it's time to time to grab hold of the entrepreneur and build that team, because that's the next step in your journey.
Right.
Love it.
And one other last point is, that's good for the solopreneur. On the entrepreneurial side, when you start getting a team, it's always good to have a facilitator come in and facilitate your strategic planning for the next year. Have a third set of eyes that aren't in the business, that can see the other things, and help your management team or your leadership team develop what the goals are going to be for the next year, and those metrics that you want to pull out of them, and then define how you're going to do it. So
Mhm.
that's really important because they're not in the business. So they're not focused on product or service or ego. They're
Mhm.
focused on process and the
Yep.
process of developing what your next goals are. And it's a
And on
very
my side of
helpful.
it, the team themselves better receives that meeting
Yep.
because it's a third party, unbiased, looking for the result success across the board, not just a, silo here and there.
Right. And a great facilitator doesn't focus on that. They focus on the ideas of the leadership group and how they're going to do it. They help formulate it into a single point objective
Yeah.
so that the whole team can move forward and agree on those objectives. So
Mhm.
it's a really good exercise. I've been through it a lot of times over the past 30 years. So, and I love
Yes.
every time we do it. So,
Excellent. Love it.
all right.
This
So what's the big takeaways today,
Oh man,
Bryce?
for me, growing out of this trap, you got to admit that you're there. I mean, I think that's where it starts. Embracing that mindset that wait, I need to think differently if I'm going to go to the next level and get out of this rut and start behaving myself in a different way to scale my business. I'm going to have to think differently. Likely, you're going to need a facilitator. You're going to need a coach. You're going to need a mentor to help you see the things that you cannot see and overcome those things. And I think another one for me was taking ownership that, hey, nothing happens to me. It happens because of me.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
For you, Paul?
I think the biggest takeaway is mapping it out,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you don't put it down on paper and map it out, it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Love it.
So,
Love it. Great analogy too.
all
Excellent.
right, we're at the end again. My
Oh, how
friend,
sad this time is, but I can't wait for our next episode.
yeah, it's going to be fun. So every Thursday, 7:30 a.m., coffee with Pivot Point Live.
Look forward to seeing you there.